Bjorn Ironfist was patrolling the northern edge of his kingdom when he heard the scream. A century of ruling the northern packs had taught him to recognize the difference between screams. Fear, agony, surrender. This was none of those. This was defiance wrapped in fury, compressed into one raw sound that tore through the storm like a war cry. It came from the east, from Blackroot Forest. Technically council territory, but close enough to his borders that the sound carried clearly through the howling wind. He stopped mid-stride, rain sliding down his bare shoulders, violet eyes narrowing as lightning split the sky. Through the torrential downpour he could see figures moving at the forest's edge, torches, a circle of fire being carved into the earth, and at the center, a small figure fighting against the hands that dragged her forward. This was not his concern. The Council of Ravens governed their own executions, their own judgments. But something about that scream, about the raw refusal in it, made him move. He reached the tree line in moments, his supernatural speed carrying him over terrain that would have taken ordinary wolves hours to navigate. He expected brutality. He expected cruelty. What he did not expect was to feel his chest tighten with something he hadn't felt in decades. Recognition. Before we continue, please hit the subscribe and like button and which city you're tuning in from. I love to know where this story found you. Now back to the story. From the shadows of an ancient oak, Bjorn watched as pack guards shoved a young woman to her knees inside a ring of carved runes. Her silver eyes blazed even as blood ran down her temple. The seer stepped forward, white robes billowing, and declared the ritual's purpose in a voice that carried no mercy. Purification trial. May the forest judge what the pack cannot. But Bjorn saw the truth immediately. This was no trial. This was an execution dressed in ceremony. The runes were wrong, twisted, designed not to test, but to trap. And when the woman's eyes swept the circle, landing on a broad-shouldered male who refused to meet her gaze, then on a smaller female who turned away entirely, he saw the exact moment she understood. Betrayal, complete and absolute. "Eva," she whispered, voice breaking. The male's jaw clenched, but he did not look. "Astrid?" The female's shoulders hunched, but she remained silent. The seer raised her hands. The circle ignited. Flames roared to life, sealing the woman inside. She was shoved backward, stumbling, and the guards retreated as if she carried plague. "Step deeper," the seer commanded. "Let the forest decide." For a moment, the woman stood frozen, rain soaking her torn dress, blood mixing with water. Then she lifted her chin, silver eyes reflecting firelight, and did something that made Bjorn's breath catch. She laughed. Not hysteria. Not fear. Bitter, dark understanding. "You're not testing me," she said clearly, loud enough for all to hear. "You're feeding me to it." Then she turned and walked deeper into Blackroot Forest, head high, while those who had condemned her watched in silence. The moment she crossed the threshold, Bjorn felt it. A pulse. Ancient. Violent. Impossible. Resonance. The rarest phenomenon in wolf history. The sign of elder blood meeting elder blood. This broken, bleeding woman carried power in her veins that rivaled his own, which raised one very important question. Why was someone with ancient alpha lineage being thrown into an execution ground in the middle of a storm? The pack dispersed quickly, as if afraid to linger near what they'd done. The fires died. The runes glowed faintly, then faded. And Bjorn stood in the rain, staring at the point where she'd disappeared into shadow, feeling something he hadn't felt in a century. Hesitation. He should leave. This was council business. Pack justice. Not his concern. But that scream, that laugh, that spine-straight walk into death. The wolf inside him growled, demanding he investigate, demanding he know why this woman felt like thunder in his veins when he'd felt nothing for decades. Bjorn stepped across the boundary into council land, into Blackroot Forest, breaking neutrality for the first time since he'd taken the crown. The forest swallowed him immediately, ancient trees groaning, branches twisting. But he moved through the darkness like he owned it, violet eyes glowing, following the pull of that impossible resonance. He found her an hour later. She was on her knees beside a stream, trying to wash blood from her face with shaking hands. Bruises already bloomed across her arms. Her breathing was labored, ribs likely cracked, but she was alive, conscious, and when shadows moved in the underbrush circling her with predatory intent, she didn't scream. She hummed, a low, haunting melody. Old runic songs his grandmother used to sing, songs meant to calm frightened children. The forest creatures paused, confused by prey that sang instead of ran. Bjorn moved before they could decide. He shifted partially, enough to show dominance, and the creatures scattered like smoke. The woman's head snapped up, silver eyes locking with his violet ones, and the resonance slammed into him so hard he nearly staggered. Power, raw and suppressed and furious, coiled beneath her skin like a caged storm. She tried to stand, failed, collapsed back against the rocks. "Who are you?" she rasped, one hand pressed to her ribs. Bjorn approached slowly, noting how her body tensed despite her exhaustion, how her eyes tracked his movements with the wariness of someone who expected violence. "Someone who wants to know," he said, voice low and rough. "Why a woman with elder blood just walked into a death sentence without begging for mercy." Her eyes widened fractionally, then narrowed. "You felt it?" "Yes." "Then you know what I am." Her laugh was bitter, tainted, wrong, dangerous. Bjorn knelt beside her, ignoring how she flinched, and touched 2 fingers to her temple. The wrongness hit him immediately. Suppression, years of it, woven through her very essence like poison in roots. "Who did this to you?" "Everyone," she whispered. "My pack, the elders. They said my eyes were cursed, that I disturbed the wards, that I was better erased." Her eyes started to drift closed. Bjorn made a decision that would shatter a century of careful neutrality. "You're not dying tonight," he said, gathering her into his arms with a gentleness that surprised even him, "because if someone went through this much trouble to kill you, you must be absolutely terrifying." She looked up at him through blood-matted hair, confusion and something like hope flickering across her face. "I want to see what happens," Bjorn continued, feeling the forest pulse around them in response to his words. "When you wake up angry. This is the story of a murder that failed and a queen who rose from the ashes. Because what happens when an alpha king teaches a suppressed wolf that she was never broken, just caged? Smash that like button if you want to see Freydis Ulfsdotter burn down everyone who tried to bury her. Let's find out who really should have been afraid. The betrayal. The storm had been building since dawn. Dark clouds rolling over the northern mountains like an invading army. By evening, rain fell in sheets so thick you could barely see 10 feet ahead, turning the forest paths into rivers of mud and broken branches. The storm had been building since dawn. Dark clouds rolling over the northern mountains like an invading army. By evening, rain fell in sheets so thick you could barely see 10 feet ahead, turning the forest paths into rivers of mud and broken branches. But Freydis barely felt the cold anymore. As she stumbled deeper into Blackroot Forest, blood mixing with rain on her skin, her mind slipped backward through time like fingers through water. 17 years earlier. "Mama, why do the stones hum when I walk past them?" Her mother's face had gone pale, silver eyes, the same shade as Fridas's own, flickering with something between fear and resignation. The warding stones at the edge of their village trembled whenever 5-year-old Fridas came near, their ancient runes glowing faint blue in response to her presence. "Don't touch them, sweetheart," her mother whispered, pulling her away quickly. "Just stay away from the borders." But Fridas had already seen the elders watching from their council hall, already heard the whispers that followed her through the village square. Wrong, cursed, shouldn't have been born under that moon. Her father refused to meet her eyes at dinner that night. He hadn't looked at her properly since her birth, as if afraid of what he might see reflected in that silver gaze 12 years earlier. "I'll always protect you, Frey. Always." Astrid's promise had felt like gospel. They were 8 and 9, bond sisters sworn in secret beneath the old oak, blood mixed and buried in the roots. Astrid was everything Fridas wasn't, golden-eyed, perfectly ordinary, loved by the pack without question. But Astrid had chosen her anyway. "They're just scared," Astrid said, braiding Fridas's dark hair with gentle fingers, "because you're different, special." "Special means dangerous here," Fridas replied quietly. Astrid had hugged her tight. "Then I'll be dangerous too." The memory tasted like ash now, because when it mattered, when the circle of fire closed and Fridas's eyes found hers in desperation, Astrid had turned away. Always had lasted exactly 11 years. 5 years earlier. The Council of Ravens governed everything in the northern packs. 9 elders, faceless behind ceremonial masks, who decided alliances, approved matings, and ordered executions without ever explaining why. They claimed to preserve ancient bloodlines, to protect pack purity, to maintain order. What they really did was erase anyone who threatened their control. Fridas learned this the day they approved her mating contract to Ivar Blackmane. "You should be grateful," the seer told her, voice flat. "Ivar's family is willing to overlook your condition. Not many would." Condition. As if her silver eyes were a disease. As if the power thrumming beneath her skin, power she'd learned to bury so deep even she couldn't feel it anymore, was something shameful. Ivar had been kind at first. Distant, but kind. He never touched her more than duty required, never looked at her the way mates were supposed to look at each other. "I'm doing my family a favor," he'd said once, drunk on winter wine. "Taking the cursed girl off the council's hands. They promised us land, resources." She was a transaction, a problem solved through paperwork. And when she'd tried to leave, tried to run to the southern territories where rumor said the rules were different, the council's hunters had dragged her back within a day. "Tainted blood doesn't get to choose," the seer had whispered, carving suppression runes into Fridas's skin while she screamed. "Tainted blood obeys." Present. A branch cracked behind her. Fridas spun, ribs screaming in protest, and found herself facing empty darkness. The forest pressed in from all sides, ancient trees groaning like old bones. Shadows moved where shadows shouldn't be. Whispers curled through the air, voices speaking in languages she almost recognized. Tainted. Cursed. Ours now. "I'm not yours," she said through gritted teeth, forcing herself to keep moving. "I'm not anyone's." The forest laughed. Or maybe that was just wind through broken branches. Her vision blurred. Pain lanced through her chest with every breath. The suppression runes the seer had carved years ago burned against her skin, reacting to something in this place, keeping her power locked down even as her body fell apart. She stumbled over roots, caught herself against a tree trunk, kept walking. Just lie down. It would be easier. Faster. The thought whispered through her mind like poison. She recognized it as her own voice, the part of her that had been broken by years of being told she was wrong, dangerous, better off gone. But another voice answered, smaller, fiercer. They wanted you to beg, you didn't. Don't start now. So she hummed instead. The old runic songs her grandmother had taught her before the council forbade such things. Songs about wolves who ran with the moon, about women who became legends, about power that couldn't be caged forever. The humming steadied her breathing, calmed the panic trying to claw up her throat. Eyes appeared in the darkness, yellow, predatory, circling, forest creatures drawn by the scent of blood and fear. They moved like liquid shadow, closing in, waiting for her to fall. Freydis pressed her back against a tree and met their gazes one by one. "I survived my own pack," she said softly. "You think you scare me?" The creatures paused, confused. Prey didn't speak. Prey ran. She started humming again, louder this time, the melody weaving through the rain and darkness like a shield made of sound. The creature's eyes flickered, wavered, and slowly they melted back into the shadows. Not because she was strong, because she refused to act like prey. Freydis let out a shaking breath and slid down the tree trunk, exhaustion finally winning. She pulled her knees to her chest, shivering violently, and watched the darkness for movement. The first night in Blackroot Forest was supposed to kill you. Everyone knew that. The forest decided who deserved to leave and who would become part of its roots. But Freydis didn't close her eyes. She kept humming, kept watching, kept breathing despite the pain. And as the hours crawled past and lightning fractured the sky, she felt something shift in the air around her. The forest was listening. The rain began to ease, the whispers faded to silence, and in that silence, Freydis felt it. Eyes on her, not predatory, not hungry, assessing. She lifted her head slowly, silver eyes scanning the darkness, and saw a shape in the shadows. Massive, silent. Wrong in a way that made her pulse quicken, not with fear, but with recognition. Whatever stood there watching her wasn't pack, wasn't council, wasn't anything she'd been taught to fear. It was something older, and for reasons she couldn't explain, it hadn't left her to die. Freydis's lips curved into a bitter smile. "Well," she called softly into the darkness, "are you going to kill me? Or just watch?" The shape didn't move, didn't answer, but she felt the weight of its attention like heat against her skin. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that this forest had not chosen her death. It had chosen something else entirely. Bjorn Ironfist hadn't broken an oath in a century. Not when the southern packs begged for his intervention during the Blood Wars. Not when his own brother challenged him for the crown and lost. Not even when the Council of Ravens executed innocents at his borders and dared him to object. Neutrality was the price of peace. The lesson carved into his bones by betrayal so deep it had frozen his heart for 100 years. And yet here he stood, half-shifted in the rain, watching a dying woman hum lullabies to predators like she had any right to still be alive. "This is not your concern," his mind insisted. "Let the Council's justice play out. You swore." But the resonance hummed in his chest like a second heartbeat, drowning out reason. He'd felt this only once before, 200 years ago, with a woman who'd worn a crown beside him and silver in her eyes, who'd whispered promises in the dark, and then sold his entire bloodline to the Council for power. Seraphine. The name still tasted like poison. She'd carried elder blood too, ancient alpha lineage that rivaled his own. The Council had feared what their union would create, a dynasty too powerful to control. So they'd made her an offer, betray him, erase his line, and rule alone with their blessing. She'd taken it without hesitation. Bjorn had sworn that day, standing over the ashes of his family, that he would never intervene in council affairs again. That he would rule his kingdom with absolute dominance and let the rest of the world burn. But this girl, this bleeding, defiant girl who refused to beg, She felt like thunder in his veins, and the forest itself was bending toward her, like she carried moonlight under her skin. Movement in the underbrush snapped his attention back to the present. The creatures were returning, emboldened by her weakness, hunger overriding their earlier confusion. Freydis's humming faltered. Her eyes tracked the shadows circling closer, silver gaze dimming with exhaustion. She tried to stand, failed, fell back against the tree trunk with a gasp of pain. The creatures lunged. Bjorn moved. He didn't think, didn't calculate, just moved, faster than mortal eyes could follow, his partial shift completing mid-stride, claws extended, muscles corded, eyes blazing violet. He hit the first creature with enough force to shatter its spine, sending it flying into a tree 20 feet away. The second he caught by the throat, claws sinking deep, and threw it into the darkness with a snarl that made the entire forest go silent. The third tried to run. Bjorn was faster. He pinned it to the ground with one hand, let it see the apex predator in his eyes, the alpha king who'd ruled for a century unopposed, and watched it whimper before releasing it. "Run," he growled, "and tell everything in this forest that she's claimed." The creature fled like smoke in wind. Bjorn straightened, reins sliding down his partially shifted form, and turned to find Freydis staring at him with wide silver eyes. Not fear, not gratitude. Recognition. "You," she breathed. "You were there. At the circle." He didn't answer, just watched her struggle to stay conscious, watched the suppression runes on her skin pulse with sickly light, fighting to keep her power buried even as her body collapsed. "The wards," she gasped, pressing a hand to her chest. "They're breaking." The air around her shimmered, cracked. And suddenly the suppression magic the council had woven through her very essence began to splinter like ice under pressure. Freydis screamed. Not pain, not fear. Release. Silver fire ignited beneath her skin just for a moment before the wards snapped back into place, locking it down. But that moment was enough. Bjorn felt it like lightning to the chest. Elder blood. Pure. Ancient. More concentrated than even Seraphine's had been. This wasn't just old power. This was primordial. The kind of bloodline the council had supposedly erased centuries ago. The kind that could reshape territories with a thought, bend lesser wolves with presence alone, challenge even him for dominance. No wonder they'd tried to kill her. Freydis collapsed forward, unconscious before she hit the ground. Bjorn caught her, the moment his skin touched hers. The resonance exploded through him with enough force to drive him to one knee. Every nerve ending lit up. Every instinct screamed mine with a possessiveness he hadn't felt since... No, not since. This was different. Stronger. Terrifying in its intensity. He could feel her heartbeat sinking with his. Could feel the suppressed power beneath her skin, calling to his own, like an answer to a question he'd stopped asking decades ago. "Mate bond," the wolf inside him snarled. "Claim her, now!" Bjorn forced the instinct down with a century of practiced control and focused on the immediate problem. She was dying. Slowly, but certainly. The suppression runes were poison, and her body couldn't sustain them much longer. Hours, maybe. A day at most. He had two choices. Leave her and maintain his neutrality, or take her across his borders and declare war on the council. Freydis stirred slightly in his arms and her lips moved, forming words too quiet to hear. Bjorn leaned closer. "Won't beg," she whispered, even unconscious. "Won't." Something in his frozen heart cracked. He stood, cradling her against his chest with a gentleness that surprised him, and looked down at her blood-streaked face. Silver eyes hidden beneath closed lids. Dark hair plastered to pale skin. defiant even in unconsciousness. If someone went through this much trouble to kill you, he thought, you must be absolutely terrifying. And he wanted to see it. Wanted to see what happened when this caged power finally broke free. Wanted to see the council's faces when they realized their greatest mistake hadn't died in Blackroot Forest. She'd found an Alpha King instead. Bjorn turned toward his territory, toward the hidden border keep where no council laws reached, and took the first step that would shatter a century of neutrality. The forest shifted around him, trees bending, shadows retreating, and he heard it, a whisper on the wind, ancient and approving. The forest already chose, Bjorn murmured, looking down at the woman in his arms. And for the first time in 100 years, he chose something for himself. He crossed the border without looking back. The border keep was a secret even most of Bjorn's own pack didn't know existed. Built into the mountainside centuries ago, hidden behind warding stones and ancient magic, it served as a refuge for the Alpha King when the weight of the crown became too heavy to bear in public. Stone walls, a single fireplace, sparse furniture worn smooth by time. No luxury, no witnesses, just silence. Bjorn kicked the door closed and carried Freydis to the bed, little more than furs piled on a wooden frame. He laid her down carefully, noting how her breathing had gone shallow, how the suppression runes on her skin pulsed with sickly green light. Poison woven through magic, the council's specialty. He worked in silence, gathering supplies, water, clean cloth, healing salves that had sat unused for decades. His hands, built for violence, moved with surprising gentleness as he cleaned the blood from her face, revealing sharp features and skin too pale. The head wound wasn't deep. Ribs cracked but not broken, bruises everywhere. But the runes. Bjorn's jaw clenched as he examined them, carved into her collarbone, her wrists, her sternum. Not recent. Years old. Layered like scar tissue, each one reinforcing the last, keeping her power buried so deep she probably didn't even know what she carried. Systematic, calculated, cruel. He traced one with his thumb, feeling the wrongness of it, and violet fire flickered at his fingertips. His own power responding, wanting to burn the magic away. But breaking suppression runes without killing the bearer required precision he didn't trust himself to have. Not yet. Not without knowing exactly what the council had done. The fire crackled. Rain drummed against stone. Bjorn sat back in the chair beside the bed and watched her breathe, this impossible woman who'd survived what should have killed her 3 times over. Why, he thought, why does she feel like... Freydis's eyes snapped open. Silver met violet across 3 feet of fire-lit space. She moved instantly, rolling off the bed despite the pain, putting distance between them, back against the wall. Her breathing came fast and shallow, eyes scanning the room for exits, for weapons, for anything. Where? Her voice cracked. She swallowed hard. Where am I? Safe, Bjorn said, not moving from the chair. You're in my territory. The council can't reach you here. Her eyes narrowed. The council reaches everywhere. Not here. Who are you? Bjorn Ironfist, Alpha King of the Northern Kingdom. Recognition flickered across her face, followed immediately by disbelief. The Alpha King doesn't interfere in council business. Everyone knows that. I don't. Bjorn leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees. Usually. Then why? She stopped, pressing a hand to her ribs with a wince. Why am I here? Because you carry elder blood, because the forest responded to you, because... He paused, weighing his words. Because I wanted to see what happens when you wake up angry. Freydis laughed. The sound was bitter, broken. I'm not angry. I'm tired. Liar. Her eyes flashed. You don't know me. I know you didn't beg, Bjorn said quietly. I know you walked into that forest with your head up. I know you hummed songs to predators instead of screaming. I know. He met her gaze steadily. You're stronger than they wanted you to believe. Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken things. Freydis's fingers moved unconsciously to the runes on her collarbone, tracing the scars with a familiar gesture that spoke of years doing exactly that. Strong, she repeated softly. The elders said I was dangerous, wrong, that my power was tainted, that I'd destroy everything if I ever... She stopped herself. If you ever what? If I ever woke up? Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. That's what the runes do. Keep me asleep. Keep me buried. Bjorn's hands clenched. How long? 13 years. Since I was 5. She looked down at her scarred wrists. Every time they sensed something stirring, they added another layer, another lock, until I couldn't feel anything at all. The casual cruelty of it made something dark and violent stir in Bjorn's chest. And your pack allowed this. My pack ordered it. Freydis's laugh was hollow. They were afraid. The council told them I was a threat to stability, that elder blood hadn't existed for centuries and shouldn't exist now, that I was an anomaly, a mistake to be corrected. She started humming, soft, barely audible, the same runic song from the forest. Bjorn noticed immediately. You do that when you're afraid. Freydis stopped mid-note, startled. What? Hum. Old songs. He tilted his head slightly. My grandmother used to sing those, to calm children during storms. I'm not a child. No, Bjorn agreed, something shifting in his expression. You're not. Another silence, this one different, charged. Freydis pulled her knees to her chest, wincing. Why did you save me, really? You said you don't interfere. You said... I swore neutrality a century ago, Bjorn interrupted, his voice taking on a harder edge. After someone with elder blood used me, betrayed everything I loved, and sold my entire bloodline to the Council for power. I watched everyone I cared about burn, and I swore I'd never let anyone close enough to do that again. Never intervene in council politics. Never. He stopped, jaw clenched. But you're here, Freydis said softly. You crossed council territory, brought me across your borders. That's not neutrality. No, it's not. So why? Bjorn met her gaze, and for the first time, let her see the truth. Because when I touched you, I felt something I haven't felt in 100 years. Resonance. And I need to know if you're like her, if you'll use that power to destroy, or if you're something different. Different how? Real. The word hung in the air between them. Freydis studied him with those unnerving silver eyes, seeing past the Alpha King to the man beneath, the one carrying a century of betrayal like a crown of thorns. I don't know what I am, she admitted quietly. They kept me buried so long. I don't know who I would have been without the runes, without the fear. She paused. But I know what I'm not. I'm not hers, whoever she was. Something in Bjorn's expression softened fractionally. Good. A log shifted in the fire, sparks danced upward. Then Bjorn stiffened, head turning sharply toward the door. His eyes flared violet. What? Freydis started. Quiet. He stood in one fluid motion, every muscle going taut. Someone crossed my borders, multiple someones. Who? Bjorn's smile was all teeth and no warmth. Hunters. The councils. Fridas's face went pale. They followed us. No. Bjorn moved to the window, looking out into darkness. They were already coming. This was planned. He turned back to her, violet eyes blazing. They never intended to let you die quietly in that forest. They wanted to make sure. Then we need to run. I don't run. The words carried absolute certainty. Fridas pushed herself to her feet despite the pain, despite everything. You said neutrality. I broke that the moment I carried you across the border. Bjorn's voice dropped to something dangerous. And I don't do anything halfway. Outside in the rain-soaked darkness, shadows moved toward the keep. The hunt had found them. Don't move. Bjorn's command was absolute as he crossed the room in 2 strides, placing himself between Fridas and the door. His eyes never left the window, tracking movement in the darkness that she couldn't see. How many? Fridas asked, forcing her voice steady despite the fear crawling up her spine. 6, maybe 7. Bjorn's jaw clenched. They're circling. Professional. Council trained. Then we're outnumbered. You are. He glanced back at her, violet eyes blazing. I'm not. The certainty in his voice should have been arrogant. Instead, it was simply fact. Bjorn moved to a wooden chest in the corner, pulling out weapons that looked ancient, a blade with runes etched along its length, claws made of some dark metal that seemed to drink in firelight. But he paused, fingers hovering over something wrapped in aged leather at the bottom of the chest. A book. Small, bound in what looked like skin. What is that? Fridas asked. Bloodline records. From before the council rewrote history. Bjorn lifted it carefully, bringing it to the table. If you carry elder blood, your lineage will be here. The council destroyed most of these, but my family kept one hidden. He opened it, pages crackling with age, and began scanning the names and symbols written in old runic script. His finger traced down bloodlines, connections, markers that meant nothing to Fridas but everything to him. Then he stopped, went completely still. What? Fridas moved closer despite the pain. What did you find? Bjorn's voice was low, almost reverent. You're not just elder blood. You're first blood. Ulfsdotter, daughter of Ulf. Direct descent from the original Alpha line, the ones who walked with the gods before the packs even existed. Fridas felt the ground tilt beneath her feet. That's not possible. That line was erased. Yes. Bjorn looked up at her, and she saw something like awe in his expression. The council called it the Purge of the First, 300 years ago. They hunted down every living descendant of the original Alphas and executed them, men, women, children. They claimed it was necessary for stability, that too much concentrated power would tear the packs apart. But really, Fridas whispered, but really, they were afraid. First Blood could command any pack, could override council authority with pure presence, could reshape territories with a thought. He gestured to the runes on her skin. That's why they buried you so deep. If you ever woke up, if your power ever manifested, I'd be unstoppable. The words felt foreign in her mouth. Wrong. She'd been called weak, broken, worthless her entire life. And now, your pack knew. Bjorn's voice hardened. They had to. The silver eyes, the way wards reacted to you, those are first blood markers. They knew exactly what you were, and they helped the council cage you. Fridas's legs gave out. She sank into the chair, mind racing. Every moment of her childhood suddenly reframed, her father's refusal to look at her, the elders' whispers, Ivar's strategic marriage, even Astrid's friendship. Had any of it been real? Or had they all been watching, waiting, making sure the monster stayed locked away. "They were terrified of me," she breathed. "All those years. They should have been." Bjorn closed the book. Because First Blood doesn't just carry power. It awakens violently when the suppression breaks. And yours. He looked at the runes on her skin, pulsing faster now, cracks forming in the magic. Is already starting to fail. As if his words summoned it, heat flared beneath Freydis's skin. Not painful, intense, like standing too close to a bonfire. But the fire was inside her, burning away years of locks and chains. She gasped, pressing a hand to her chest. "Breathe," Bjorn commanded, suddenly beside her. "Don't fight it. Let it—" Silver light ignited beneath her skin, just for a second. Just enough to make the shadows in the room recoil and the fire in the hearth roar higher. The walls trembled. Outside, trees groaned and bent, branches reaching toward the keep like supplicants before a queen. Bjorn caught her before she collapsed, his hands steady on her shoulders. "The forest recognizes you. It knows what you are." "I don't know what I am," Freydis said through gritted teeth, fighting to control the power trying to tear free. "I don't know how to." "You will." His voice was certain. "But not tonight. Tonight, we survive." A howl split the air outside. Close, too close. Bjorn's head snapped up, eyes flaring. "They're moving in." He released Freydis and moved to the window in one fluid motion. What he saw made his expression go cold and dangerous. "What is it?" Freydis asked, pushing herself upright, despite the trembling in her limbs. 7 hunters, Council Elite." Bjorn's voice was flat. "And one of them—" He paused, something like regret flickering across his features. "One of them is someone you know." Freydis's heart stopped. "Who?" "Blonde. Golden eyes. Moves like she's done this before." Bjorn looked back at her. "Your bond sister." The name fell from Freydis's lips like a curse. "Astrid." Of course. Of course Astrid was among them. The girl who'd sworn to protect her. Who'd promised always, now hunting her down like an animal that needed culling. The betrayal should have hurt. Should have broken something inside her. Instead, it ignited something else entirely. Heat flared again beneath her skin, hotter this time. The suppression runes cracked audibly, green light flickering and failing. Power rose like a tide, and with it came rage, pure, ancient, and absolutely done with being afraid. "Freydis," Bjorn started. "She was there." Freydis's voice came out strange, layered with something that made even the Alpha King pause. "When they shoved me in the circle, when Ivar turned away, Astrid was there, and she did nothing. I know. And now she's here to finish what they started. Yes." Freydis looked up at Bjorn, silver eyes blazing with light that wasn't quite natural. "Then let her try." Something dangerous and approving flickered in Bjorn's expression. "Can you stand?" "Yes." "Can you fight?" Freydis thought about 13 years of suppression. Thought about every time she'd been called wrong, broken, dangerous. Thought about Ivar's cold indifference and Astrid's final betrayal. Thought about how they'd expected her to die quietly. "I don't know," she admitted. "But I'm about to find out." Bjorn smiled, a real smile, sharp and feral. "Good answer." He moved to the door, weapons in hand, power radiating off him like heat waves, the Alpha King preparing for war. Outside, the hunters closed in, and inside, something ancient finally began to wake. "Stay behind me," Bjorn commanded, hand on the door, "until you can't anymore." And then? He looked back at her, violet eyes meeting silver. Then show them why the council was right to be afraid. The door burst open. The hunt had arrived. They came through the door like shadows given teeth. 7 hunters, council-trained, moving with the predatory grace of wolves who'd killed for centuries. They filled the small keep in seconds, surrounding Bjorn and Freydis with weapons drawn and eyes glowing gold in the firelight. Bjorn didn't move, didn't shift, just stood between them and Freydis with the absolute stillness of an apex predator, deciding whether prey was worth the effort. Alpha King, the lead hunter spoke, voice muffled behind a ceremonial mask marked with raven feathers. Step aside. This is council business. This is my territory, Bjorn replied, voice dangerously soft. Which makes it my business. The girl carries tainted blood. She was sentenced. Murdered, you mean? Bjorn's eyes flared violet. Let's not pretend the council deals in justice. The hunters shifted, nervous despite their numbers. Even Council Elite knew better than to challenge an Alpha King in his own domain. Then one of them stepped forward, smaller than the rest, blonde hair pulled back in warrior braids. Golden eyes Freydis knew better than her own reflection. Astrid removed her mask slowly. "Hello, Frey," she said quietly. The casual use of the nickname, the one only Bond sisters used, hit Freydis like a physical blow. Her breath caught. Heat flared beneath her skin, power surging in response to the emotional wound. "Don't," Freydis said through gritted teeth. "Don't call me that. You lost that right when you turned away." Astrid's expression remained carefully neutral. "I did what I had to do. For the pack. For stability. You watched them throw me into the forest to die. You're corrupted, Frey. You always have been." Astrid took another step closer, and Bjorn's low growl made her pause. "The elders discovered the truth years ago. You carry first blood. Do you understand what that means? The last time someone with your lineage existed, they started a war that killed thousands. The council had no choice." "There's always a choice," Freydis interrupted, power crackling beneath her skin like lightning in a bottle. "You chose to betray me. Don't dress it up as duty. I chose to protect everyone else from you." Astrid's composure cracked, genuine emotion bleeding through. "Do you think I wanted this? You were my sister, my best friend. But I saw what you were becoming. The way wards shattered around you, the way animals fled when you walked past. You're dangerous, Frey. You always were. Then why are you still talking?" Bjorn's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "If she's so dangerous, why send 7 hunters when one would do?" Astrid's jaw clenched. "Because we know what she's capable of, and we know what you are too, Alpha King. We're hoping you'll see reason. Step aside. Let us finish this. The council is willing to overlook your interference, if you cooperate now." "Generous," Bjorn said flatly. "Practical." Astrid gestured to Freydis. "She's already awakening. Look at her. The runes are failing. When her power fully manifests, she'll be unstoppable. Is that what you want? Another tyrant with first blood burning through the packs?" For a moment, Bjorn was silent. Freydis could feel his presence behind her, solid and unmovable. But he didn't speak. And in that silence, doubt crept in. What if Astrid was right? What if the power burning beneath her skin really was corruption? What if she was dangerous, monstrous, everything they'd always said she was? Freydis looked down at her scarred hands, at the runes cracking and failing, at the silver light pulsing beneath her skin. Maybe they should finish it. Maybe it would be easier. "No." Bjorn's voice was absolute. Freydis looked up, startled. "She stays," Bjorn continued, taking a deliberate step forward. The hunters tensed immediately. "Under my protection, in my territory, and if the council has a problem with that." His smile was all teeth. "They can come tell me themselves." Astrid's eyes widened. You're violating the neutrality pact. You swore. I swore a lot of things a century ago. Bjorn's power began to radiate outward, pressing against the walls, making the fire roar higher. I'm done keeping those promises. You'd start a war over her? Astrid's voice rose with disbelief. Over a corrupted girl you've known for a single night? Yes. The simplicity of it staggered the room into silence. Freydis felt something crack in her chest, not pain. Something else. Something that felt dangerously like hope. Last chance, the lead hunter said, hand tightening on his blade. Surrender the girl or face council judgment. Bjorn's laugh was low and dangerous. You think you're a threat to me? In my territory? With my forest at my back? He rolled his shoulders, and power rippled through the air like heat waves. I've been holding back for a century, wondering if I'd forgotten how to be what I really am. His eyes blazed violet fire. Thank you for reminding me. The shift began. Freydis had seen partial shifts before. Everyone had. The elongated claws, the enhanced features, the glowing eyes. Quick transformations for combat or intimidation. This was something else entirely. Bjorn's body expanded, bones cracking and reforming, muscles corded with impossible strength. His skin rippled with dark fur. His face extended into something between man and beast, jaws filled with teeth that could crush stone. He grew, 7 feet, 8, 9, until his head nearly touched the ceiling, massive frame filling the space with raw, undeniable power. A true alpha shift, the kind spoken of in legends, the kind no one had seen in generations. The hunters stumbled backward, weapons suddenly seeming like toys. But Bjorn wasn't finished. He threw his head back and roared, a sound that shook the foundations, that rattled the windows, that carried through the forest like a declaration of war. Outside, the trees responded. Branches bent toward the keep. Roots erupted from the ground, the entire forest recognizing its king and bowing in submission. Even the hunters fell to their knees, unable to resist the dominance radiating from him in waves. All except Astrid, who stood trembling but defiant, golden eyes locked on Freydis. You're making a mistake, she said, voice breaking. When she wakes up, when her power manifests fully, she'll destroy everything, including you. Bjorn shifted partially back, maintaining his enhanced form but regaining speech. His voice came out deeper, layered with the wolf. Then I'll burn with her, he said. But she doesn't die tonight. She doesn't die ever, because Freydis Ulfsdotter is under the protection of the Northern Crown. And anyone who touches her, his eyes swept over each hunter, answers to me. The declaration hung in the air like a blade. The council won't accept this, the lead hunter said, struggling to his feet. You've violated every law, broken every pact. They'll send armies. Let them. Bjorn's smile was terrifying. I've been neutral for a century, patient, obedient. The council thought that meant I was weak. He took a step forward, and the hunters scrambled backward. They forgot what I am, what I've always been. And what's that? Astrid whispered. The Alpha King who ended the last war by himself. Bjorn's violet eyes blazed. And I'm ready to end the next one too. Silence, absolute and heavy. Then Bjorn gestured to the door with one clawed hand. Leave. Tell the council what happened here. Tell them Freydis lives. Tell them... He paused, something dark and satisfied in his expression. That their greatest mistake didn't die in Blackroot Forest. She found a king instead. The hunters didn't need to be told twice. They fled into the night, even Astrid, who cast one last look at Freydis, something like regret in her golden eyes, before disappearing into shadow. The door swung shut behind them. Bjorn shifted back fully, returning to his human form, chest heaving with exertion. Freydis stared at him, unable to speak, unable to process what had just happened. He'd chosen her. Over neutrality, over peace, over a century of carefully maintained control. He'd chosen her. Why? The word came out broken. Why would you do that? Bjorn turned to face her, violet eyes still glowing faintly. Because, he said quietly. I'm tired of watching people get erased for being powerful. I'm tired of letting the council dictate who deserves to exist. He took a step closer. And because when I carried you across that border, I felt something I haven't felt in 100 years. Purpose. War is coming, Freydis whispered. Because of me. No. Bjorn's smile was fierce. War is coming because I chose to fight. Outside, the forest settled. Inside, power thrummed between them like a living thing. And somewhere in the distance, council ravens took flight, carrying news that would reshape the north. The Alpha King had broken his oath, and the girl with first blood lived. 3 days passed in uneasy quiet. The hunters didn't return. The council sent no envoys, but the silence felt like a held breath before a scream. Bjorn fortified the keep, setting wards that would alert him to any approach. Freydis tried to help, tried to be useful, but the power beneath her skin grew stronger with each passing hour. The suppression runes cracked further. Heat pulsed through her veins like molten silver. She was coming apart, or coming together. She couldn't tell which. On the third night, as storm clouds gathered and lightning fractured the sky, Astrid returned, alone. Freydis sensed her before she knocked, that bond-sister connection still thrumming faintly despite everything. She opened the door before Bjorn could stop her. Astrid stood in the rain, no weapons visible, hands raised in surrender, but her golden eyes held something desperate. I need to talk to you, she said. Just you. Please, Frey. Don't call me that. Please. Astrid's voice cracked. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. Bjorn appeared behind Freydis, power radiating warning. This is a trap. Probably, Freydis agreed. But she looked at Astrid, at the girl who'd braided her hair, who'd sworn blood oaths under oak trees, who'd been her entire world once, and felt something twist in her chest. 5 minutes. Outside. Where he can see us. Bjorn's jaw clenched, but he nodded. I'll be watching. Freydis stepped into the rain, keeping distance between herself and Astrid. They stood 10 feet apart, storm building overhead, lightning illuminating their faces in flashes of white. You shouldn't have come back, Freydis said quietly. I know. Astrid wrapped her arms around herself. But I couldn't. Frey, listen to me. The council is planning something. Something worse than hunters. They're gathering the entire Raven Guard. Hundreds of them. They're going to burn this entire territory to ash rather than let you live. Then why warn me? Because despite everything, you were my sister. Astrid took a step closer. And because I'm trying to save you one last time. By delivering me to them. By asking you to run. Astrid's eyes glistened with something that might have been tears or rain. The Alpha King broke neutrality for you. Fine, let him have his war. But you don't have to be here when it starts. I know routes out of the north. Safe passages. I can get you to the southern territories where the council's reach is weaker. No. Frey. I said no. Power flared beneath Freydis' skin, making the rain around her hiss into steam. I'm done running. Done hiding. Done letting people tell me I'm too dangerous to exist. You are dangerous. Astrid's composure shattered. Do you feel what's happening to you? That's not natural. That's not... The Freydis I knew would never have wanted this. She wanted to be normal, safe. She wanted to be loved. Freydis's voice rose, silver light beginning to glow beneath her skin. She wanted her pack to accept her, her mate to see her, her bond sister to stand beside her. But none of that happened, did it? You all chose to be afraid instead. Because your power, my power, is mine. The shout tore from Freydis's throat with force that made Astrid stumble backward. Not the councils to suppress, not the packs to judge, not yours to fear, mine. Thunder cracked overhead. You can't control it, Astrid said, and there was genuine fear in her voice now. When it fully wakes up, you'll lose yourself. You'll become exactly what they said you were, a monster. And I can't. Her voice broke. I can't watch that happen. So please, please, Frey, come with me. Let me save you before it's too late. For one moment Freydis wavered, because this was Astrid, her sister. The girl who'd protected her when they were children, who'd promised always, who was standing in the rain, begging her to run. Maybe she was right. Maybe the power was corruption. Maybe. Then Freydis saw it. A flicker of movement in the trees behind Astrid. Golden eyes reflecting lightning. 5, 6, 7 sets. The hunters. Waiting in ambush. Understanding crashed over Freydis like ice water. You didn't come to warn me, she breathed. You came to distract me. Astrid's expression crumbled with guilt. I'm sorry. God, Frey, I'm so sorry, but they promised if I brought you in alive they'd make it quick, painless. You wouldn't have to suffer. Get away from her! Bjorn's roar split the night as he burst from the keep, already shifting. The hunters exploded from the tree line, and Astrid lunged forward, binding runes glowing in her hands, trying to slap them onto Freydis's skin before she could react. I'm sorry, Astrid whispered again. I'm saving you the only way I can. Her fingers touched Freydis's wrist. The suppression runes shattered. All of them. Every single lock the council had placed over 13 years, every chain wrapped around her power, every cage built to keep her buried, they exploded outward in a wave of silver fire that sent Astrid flying backward 20 feet. Freydis screamed, not pain, not fear, liberation. Power erupted from her like a star going nova. Silver fire ignited beneath her skin, blazing so bright it turned night into day. The storm overhead responded, lightning striking the ground around her in a perfect circle, and she felt everything. The forest, every tree, every root, every living thing connected to the earth. She felt their recognition, their submission, as ancient magic older than the council, older than the packs, older than memory itself rose to meet her call. Her body shifted, not like a normal wolf, like something between forms, partially human, partially beast, wholly other. Silver fur rippled across her skin. Her eyes blazed with light that held the moon itself. Claws extended, not dark like Bjorn's, but crystalline, gleaming like starlight made solid. First blood, true form. The shape of alphas before packs existed, before hierarchy, when wolves walked with gods. The hunters froze mid-charge, unable to move against the dominance pouring off her in waves. Astrid stared up from the ground, eyes wide with terror and awe. What are you? What I always was. Freydis's voice came out layered, harmonized with something ancient. What you tried to kill. She took a step forward, and the earth responded. Roots erupted around Astrid, caging her without touching, holding her in place. Freydis! Bjorn's voice cut through the power haze. Don't! She turned to face him, silver fire still blazing, and saw him stop mid-stride. Not in fear. In recognition. This was what he'd felt 3 days ago. What the resonance had been screaming. Not just power, not just elder blood. A match, an equal, a queen to stand beside a king. Bjorn did something that made the hunters gasp in shock. He shifted back to human form, walked forward slowly, and dropped to one knee before her. Not submission, not surrender, acknowledgement. "Freydis Ulfsdotter," he said, voice carrying through the storm. "First blood, last of your line. The forest recognizes you. I recognize you." His violet eyes met her blazing silver ones, not as a threat, not as corruption, but as what you are. Alpha Queen. The words resonated through her bones, through the earth, through everything, and the bond that had been building between them since that first moment in Blackroot Forest finally ignited. It slammed into place with enough force to drive Freydis to her knees beside him. The resonance became something more, a tether, a connection, a bond forged not by council law but by choice and recognition and power meeting power without fear. Mate bond, true bond. The kind that hadn't existed since first blood walked the earth. Silver and violet fire twined together, spiraling upward into the storm. The forest roared in response. Every tree bent toward them. Every creature within 100 miles felt the declaration and understood. A new Alpha Queen had awakened, and the North would never be the same. Bjorn rose slowly, extending his hand. Freydis took it, letting him pull her upright, and felt the bond settle into place between them like a second heartbeat. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice still layered with power. Bjorn's smile was fierce and wild. "Now? Now we show the council what happens when they try to kill queens." Behind them, Astrid wept in her cage of roots. Around them, the hunters fled into darkness. Above them, the storm raged in celebration, and somewhere deep in council territory, ravens screamed warnings that came too late. The girl they'd tried to erase had become the most powerful alpha in 300 years, and she was done being afraid. They came at dawn, not with hunters or assassins this time. The Council of Ravens themselves, all 9 of them, arrived at the border of Bjorn's territory in ceremonial robes and masks, carried in palanquins like the ancient rulers they believed themselves to be. They expected negotiation, compromise, perhaps submission. They got a queen standing beside a king, with an entire forest at their backs. Freydis stood at the edge of the keep's clearing, silver eyes blazing, power coiled beneath her skin like a sleeping storm. She'd learned control over the past week, not suppression but mastery, the difference between being caged and choosing when to unleash. Bjorn stood beside her, hand resting casually on the pommel of his blade. United, unmovable. The seer stepped forward first, white robes pristine despite the muddy ground. She removed her raven mask slowly, revealing a face carved from ice and arrogance. "Alpha King," she said, voice carrying false warmth. "We come to discuss terms. Surely we can resolve this unfortunate situation without further bloodshed." "Situation," Bjorn repeated flatly. "Is that what you're calling attempted murder now?" "The girl was sentenced according to pack law. Your law." Freydis spoke, and her voice carried the weight of ancient power. "Not pack law, not natural law, council law. The kind you invented to keep yourselves in control." The seer's eyes narrowed. "You don't understand the delicate balance we maintain, the stability we provide. Without the council, the packs would tear themselves apart. The packs survived for thousands of years before you existed." Freydis took a step forward, and several council members flinched. "They'll survive long after you're gone." Brave words for someone who's been awake less than a fortnight. Another council member spoke, male, his mask decorated with blood-red feathers. "You think discovering your power makes you qualified to challenge centuries of governance. You're a child playing with forces you don't comprehend. Then let me comprehend this. Fridas gestured and roots erupted from the ground, caging the council members in circles of living wood, not touching them, not hurting them, just demonstrating absolute control. I know you murdered my ancestors 300 years ago. I know you've been hunting down anyone with first blood ever since, terrified we'd return and expose your lie. What lie? The seer demanded. That you're necessary. Bjorn's voice was cold. That packs can't govern themselves. That only you have the wisdom to decide who lives and who dies. He smiled without warmth. But the truth is simpler. You're afraid. You've always been afraid. And you've built an empire on that fear. We maintain order, the seer snapped, composure cracking. We prevent chaos. Do you know what happened the last time someone with first blood tried to rule? The burning wars, thousands dead, entire territories, started by your council. A new voice interrupted. Everyone turned. A figure emerged from the forest. Old, hunched, but with eyes that held centuries of memory. An elder even the council respected. Grandmother Helka, the seer breathed. The old woman ignored her, walking directly to Fridas with surprising steadiness. I was there, child. During the burning wars, I watched your ancestor try to unite the packs peacefully. I watched the council poison her mind, turn her allies against her, and then blame the resulting chaos on her bloodline. She touched Fridas's cheek gently. They've been rewriting history for 300 years, making monsters out of saviors. That's not, the seer started. Silence. Grandmother Helka's command carried weight even council members couldn't ignore. I stayed quiet for centuries, watched you execute innocents, suppress bloodlines, maintain your grip through fear and lies. She turned back to Fridas. But I will not watch another first blood die to preserve your power. The girl lives, the bond is forged, and your reign ends today. The clearing fell into stunned silence. Then Bjorn spoke, voice carrying absolute authority. By right of crown and territory, I declare council law void within the Northern Kingdom. Any pack seeking refuge from your judgment will find sanctuary here. Any wolf suppressed, caged, or marked for execution based on bloodline will be protected under my law. You can't. The seer's voice rose with panic. The other territories will never already have, another voice called out. From the tree line, pack leaders emerged, representatives from the eastern forests, the western plains, even the disputed southern marches, dozens of them, all wearing expressions of grim satisfaction. We've been waiting for someone to challenge you, the Eastern Alpha said. Someone strong enough to stand against your judgment. The Alpha King and his queen just gave us that excuse. The seer's face went white. This is treason. This is justice. Bjorn gestured, and his wolves brought forward two bound figures, Ivar Blackmane and Astrid. Ivar looked diminished without his pack behind him, shoulders hunched, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. Astrid's face was streaked with tears, golden eyes hollow. Ivar Blackmane, Fridas said quietly, and he flinched at her voice. You took a mate bond and turned it into a transaction. You watched them suppress me, cage me, prepare to execute me. For what? Land? Resources? The council promised. Ivar started. The council is finished. Fridas cut him off. And so are you. Exile, permanent. You'll wander packless until you die alone, as you deserve. Ivar crumpled. Exile was worse than death for a wolf. No pack, no bonds, no home. Just endless wandering until time or enemies caught up with you. Take him to the borders, Bjorn commanded. Let every territory know Ivar Blackmane is cast out. Guards dragged him away as he wept. Then Fridas turned to Astrid, the bond sister who'd betrayed her 3 times over, who'd tried to cage her even in that final moment. who'd chosen fear over loyalty, over love, over everything that once mattered. "I should hate you," Freydis said softly. "I should want revenge." "Then take it," Astrid whispered brokenly. "I deserve it. Everything you want to do to me, I deserve." "I know." Freydis studied her former sister with eyes that held more sadness than anger. "But I'm not who you feared I'd become. I'm not a monster. I'm not corruption." She paused. "I'm just done carrying you." "What does that mean?" "Exile," Freydis said. "Same as Ivar. You chose the council over your bond sister. You chose fear over love, so go, wander, and live with what you've done." Astrid's face crumbled, but she nodded. Perhaps exile was mercy. Perhaps it was worse than death. Either way, she'd earned it. As guards led her away, Freydis felt something release in her chest. Not forgiveness, not quite, but freedom. Freedom from the weight of their betrayal, from the need for their approval. She turned back to the council members, still caged in roots. "The Council of Ravens is dissolved," she declared, voice ringing with power. "Your territories are returned to the Pax. Your laws are void. Your judgments are meaningless." She smiled, sharp and final. "And anyone who tries to rebuild your empire answers to me." The seer opened her mouth to protest. The roots tightened fractionally. A warning. She closed her mouth. "Leave," Bjorn commanded, "while you still can. Return to whatever holes you crawled from, because the North belongs to its people now. Not to you." The roots released. The council members scrambled away, robes muddy, dignity shattered, power broken. As they fled, the pack leaders who'd gathered began to cheer. A sound that built and built until it echoed through the entire forest. The council had fallen, and in their place stood something new. Freydis turned to Bjorn, silver eyes meeting violet. "What now?" "Now?" Bjorn smiled. "Now you claim what's yours." Together, they walked into Blackroot Forest. The forest that had nearly killed her. The forest that had chosen her instead. And as Freydis stepped beneath the ancient trees, they bent toward her like subjects before a queen. The earth hummed. The air shimmered. "Blackroot Forest," she said softly, "is sacred ground now. Protected. No one enters without permission. No one hunts here. No one uses it for execution, ever again." The forest pulsed in response. Agreement. Recognition. And somewhere deep in the roots, ancient magic settled into place, declaring this land hers. The girl they'd left to die now ruled the forest itself. Justice, wrapped in silver fire and roots. Spring came to Blackroot Forest for the first time in 300 years. Flowers bloomed where only shadow had grown. Birds returned to branches that had once groaned with death. The ancient trees, freed from their burden as executioners, straightened towards sunlight like prisoners finally unchained. The forest remembered what it had been before the council twisted it into a graveyard, and it chose to be that again. Freydis walked through the transformation with wonder in her silver eyes, trailing her fingers over bark that hummed beneath her touch. The bond between her and this place had deepened over the months, not ownership, but partnership. The forest protected her, she protected it in return. "You're smiling," Bjorn observed, falling into step beside her. "It's terrifying." "Good." Freydis glanced at him, that small smile widening. "I've earned the right to be terrifying." "That you have, my queen." The title still felt strange. Alpha Queen of the North, they called her now. Freydis Ulfsdotter, first blood. The woman who'd broken the council and reclaimed her lineage. Packs came from across the territories to pledge loyalty, to seek guidance, to see if the legends were true. She was still learning what it meant, still discovering the depths of her power, the weight of her responsibility, the balance between strength and mercy. But she wasn't learning alone. Bjorn had kept his promise, stood beside her through every challenge, every difficult decision, every moment when the crown felt too heavy, not as her superior or her protector, but as her equal, king and queen, mate and mate. The bond between them had settled into something steady and fierce, not the desperate intensity of those first days, but something deeper, built on choice and trust, and the quiet knowledge that they'd chosen each other when the entire world said they shouldn't. The coronation ceremony is in an hour, Bjorn reminded her gently. The pack elders are already gathering. Freydis sighed. I know, I just needed... She gestured to the forest around them. A moment, to remember. Remember what? What it felt like to be her, the girl who thought she was broken. Freydis touched the faded scars on her collarbone where suppression runes had once burned. Before I knew what I was capable of, before all of this. Bjorn studied her quietly. Do you miss her? Sometimes. Freydis's voice went soft. She was smaller, quieter, easier to overlook. There was a comfort in that, in not carrying the weight of everyone's expectations. You could step away. Bjorn's words held no judgment. Walk into these trees and never come back. I'd tell them you chose solitude. No one would question a First Blood's right to isolation. Freydis looked at him, silver eyes searching. Would you come with me? Anywhere. The simplicity of it made her chest ache. This man, this Alpha King, who'd ruled alone for a century, who'd frozen his heart against betrayal, who'd broken every oath to save her, would walk away from everything if she asked. I know, she said softly. That's why I won't ask. She took his hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. The girl who wanted to disappear died in that forest. I'm not her anymore. I'm a queen, Bjorn finished, and queens don't hide. No, Freydis smiled. They remake the world instead. The coronation was nothing like the ceremonies of old. No council oversight. No approval from faceless elders, just packs gathered in the heart of Blackroot Forest, now renamed Silverroot in honor of its new queen, witnessing as Grandmother Helka placed a crown of woven branches and moonstone on Freydis's head. By ancient right and earned power, the old woman declared, I name you Alpha Queen. May your reign be just. May your strength be tempered with wisdom. May you never forget what it felt like to be cast aside. I won't, Freydis promised, voice carrying through the clearing. Every law I write, every judgment I make, I'll remember. I'll remember what it's like to be called wrong. Dangerous. Better off erased. She met the eyes of the gathered wolves, seeing her own past reflected in some of their faces. And I swear, no one will be caged for their bloodline again. Not while I stand. The crowd erupted in howls of approval. Bjorn stepped forward, placing his own crown, ancient, worn by northern kings for generations, beside hers. Not above. Beside. Equal. The North has two rulers now, he declared. King and queen, bound by choice, not tradition. May we rule with strength and mercy both. More howls, more celebration. Music began. Drums and voices rising in songs older than the council, older than written law, songs about wolves who ran free and chose their own destinies. Freydis let herself be swept into it. Dancing with packmates she barely knew, but who accepted her without question, accepting toasts and blessings and promises of loyalty, watching as Bjorn moved through the crowd with easy authority, the weight that had pressed on his shoulders for centuries finally lifted. He caught her eye across the fire and smiled. A real smile, unguarded. and she felt the mate bond pulse with warmth. Hours later, when the celebration had mellowed into quiet conversations and dying fires, they slipped away. The border keep was exactly as it had been that first night. Stone walls, simple furniture, a single fireplace crackling with warmth. But everything was different now. Freydis curled into the furs on the bed, exhaustion finally catching up. Bjorn settled beside her, one arm wrapping around her waist, pulling her close. "Tired?" he murmured against her hair. "Exhausted." She nestled deeper into his warmth. Who knew being a queen was so much work? His chest rumbled with quiet laughter. "You'll get used to it." "Will I?" Freydis turned to face him, silver eyes meeting violet in the firelight. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is real, that I'm here, that you—" She touched his face gently. "That you chose me, when you could have chosen neutrality." "Neutrality is overrated." Bjorn caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "And you were always worth the risk. Even if I'd been corrupted, even if I'd become the monster they said I was. Even then, his certainty was absolute, because I would have stood beside you anyway, reminded you who you were, fought with you or for you, whatever you needed." He smiled softly. "That's what mates do." Freydis felt tears prick her eyes, happy ones for once. "I love you," she whispered. "I don't think I've said it out loud yet, but I do. Completely. Terrifyingly." "I know." Bjorn's thumb brushed away a tear that escaped. "I've known since that first night. When you hummed songs to predators instead of screaming, you were already the bravest person I'd ever met. Falling in love was inevitable." She kissed him then, soft and deep and full of promise, the kind of kiss that spoke of forevers and choices and bonds that nothing could break. When they finally pulled apart, Freydis found herself humming, not from fear this time, from contentment, from peace. Bjorn recognized the melody, that old runic song his grandmother used to sing. "Still humming when you feel strongly?" he observed with gentle amusement. "Some habits don't break." Freydis settled against his chest, listening to his heartbeat sync with hers through the bond. "Besides, it reminds me that I survived, that I'm still here." "You're more than here." Bjorn's voice was quiet, but fierce. "You're thriving. Building something better than what came before, giving hope to every wolf who ever felt like they didn't belong." "We're building it," Freydis corrected. "Together." "Together," Bjorn agreed. The fire crackled. Rain began to fall softly outside. Not a storm this time, just gentle spring rain bringing life to roots and earth. And in that quiet moment, Freydis let herself feel the full weight of everything that had changed. They'd left her behind to die in the evil forest. They'd carved runes into her skin and called her tainted. They'd shoved her into darkness and expected the forest to devour her whole. They'd wanted her erased, forgotten, unmourned. But the forest hadn't taken her. It had recognized her, protected her, and given her the one thing she'd needed most. A king who saw her as she truly was. Who chose her when choosing her meant war. Who knelt before her not in submission, but in acknowledgement of her power, her worth, her right to exist without apology. And together, scarred and fierce and absolutely done with letting others define them, they would remake the North into something better. No more councils deciding who deserved to live. No more suppression, cages, executions in the dark. Just wolves running free beneath the moon, choosing their own paths, building their own futures. The girl they'd tried to kill had become a queen, and the forest that should have been her grave became her kingdom instead. Freydis smiled in the darkness, Bjorn's heartbeat steady beneath her ear, and whispered the truth into the quiet. They wanted to break me. They made me unbreakable instead. Outside, Silverroot Forest hummed its agreement, and the world, slowly but certainly, began to change. The end. They left her behind to die in the evil forest, but the forest did not take her. It gave her a king, and together they remade the world. If you enjoyed this story, let me know in the comments below. Your support helps me bring more moonlit stories like this to life. Don't forget to subscribe for more tales of wolves, romance, and second chances that refuse to stay buried.